the next lecture and the next lecture, they will be relevant for iteration 3. But again, like we want you to learn these contents early in the lectures and then practice them in the lab next week before iteration 3, so you can get prepared for iteration 3. Okay, so it's exceptions. We talk about exceptions today. You practice in the next week's lab and then iteration 3 in the project. So exceptions. So exceptions is also about correctness, like make sure your software products has less bugs, not less bugs, but protect your software product to like make sure it's safe. Right? We talk about like using Jest test. We talk about tag scripts. So both of them are introduced to make your software product safe. And so as this lecture, so exceptions is also about making your software safe. So it is about dealing with errors and make your program more robust. Okay, let's have a look at this example. So let's have a quick look at this example. So we use prompt function. So you have used the prompt function in a lab before, so you know how it works, right? So it reads from a user input from the terminal, right? So this is prompt function, and it's from the prompt sync library. And the function that we have here is to calculate the square root of x, which is a number data type, right? And return max.power is the function to calculate the square root of number. And then after we define this function, we get a user input, like what kind of data that they want to, what is the number that they want to get a square root of. So we have prompt function, please enter a number, and then we console log the square root of this input. Okay, so this is the flow of this function. Let's try to run this function and have a look and see if there's any problem with it. Sorry, I make it a little bit bigger, and then clear. Okay, so I'm going to call this function npm run ts node. This file's name is called just crash.ts. And then please enter a number. Can anyone give me a number that you want to get a square root of?
81.
Sorry? 1?
81.
A1?
Yes.
Nah, nothing. Because it's not a valid number, right? So this is expected, right? Any other number that you want to try? -1. Okay, good on you. Oh, sorry. It should be -1. Yeah, nah. Right, because they are not valid inputs. So how can we handle this kind of unexpected user input? Is there a way to handle it? Any suggestion? Like how can we handle this kind of invalid user input? Let's have a look at this negative example first. So maybe we can have something like if. Okay, so maybe before we call this function like max power, we can check whether this x is negative or positive, right? So we can check that. So this is if x is negative, and then what we can do, maybe we can just console.error and then give an error message. Input is negative, and then we process.exit. We quit the process, right? So this is one way like we can handle this potential invalid user input. So let's try again and put in -1 without giving us a null. It shows us like input is negative, right? So this is one way of handling invalid user input. And there's no issue with that. It's absolutely okay. And then you can have another if statement. So if the input is not a number, like for example the A1 example, right? However, there's one other way that we can handle this kind of invalid user input. We can, instead of having console.error input is negative and then process exit 1, we can just throw an error. So the way we handle is say like throw new error and give it an error message saying that error input, which is negative. Okay, so let's have a try running this code. Oh, sorry, the wrong one. That is throw catch, I believe. Yeah. No. Which one? Exception 1. Okay, that is exception 1. So exception 1 is the same with our example, but there's something new here called throw new error. And let's see how it looks like. Exception 1, exception 1, and then let's give it a -1 again. And you can see this is what is throwing to us. It's error message. Looks very similar to the error message when we have an undefined variable, or like it looks like the error message or the error message that JavaScript throw to us or Node.js throw to us, right? And yeah, and this is the error message basically, and some more detail like where the error happens at square, and more high level like explanation, and then blah blah blah. So this is how throw new error works. But what is it? Like, why do we need this kind of throw new error, right? So this is exception. So when we throw new error, we are actually throw something called exception. So exception is an action that disrupts the normal flow of a program. So it disrupts there and exits the program there. You do not need to have like process.exit1. And this action is often representative of an error being thrown. And it's a way of recovering from errors. Okay. And it's a method of protecting our software to be safe. And different languages have different ways of protecting our software to be safe. So for example, in C, when we write like if x is negative and then we do blah blah blah, right? So this is the way like we are familiar with, like how we handle errors in C. But in JavaScript, it relies more on exceptions to handle errors. So this is two conventions. Like we cannot say which way is right or which way is wrong. Like both are correct, but there are different conventions of handling errors for different programming language. Like the if statement and then the console log error and then process exit. So that way is the convention for languages like C. But for JavaScript, the convention is using exceptions. And they also have different mindsets of dealing with errors. So in JavaScript, like throwing errors is, like we call it, easier to ask forgiveness than permission. So this sentence is not created by me. So this is the mindset of JavaScript. So it's called easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. So the idea is that it encourages you to assume that everything works. Just run the program. However, if there's something wrong happened, and then deal with the errors. Otherwise, it just assume everything to be working fine, and then try everything, and then catch the error. So this is the convention of JavaScript. The good thing about this one is it first assumes everything works, so the core logic is there. It's not disrupted by our catching errors here and there. So the call logic is there like together. So it's less disruptive, and the call logic is simpler. But they also have some cons that we'll show later. The other like convention for programming language like C is called look before you leap. So check first, make sure everything works, find any potential issues first, and then run the program. So it's like different mindsets, like in the different programming language. Like JavaScript is assume everything works, and if anything goes wrong, catch it and deal with it. But C is like check everything first, make sure everything works, and then run the call logic. Right. So this is the convention of different programming languages. Okay, so let's come back to this example. We had throw new error, so we throw that, but we didn't handle it. So we haven't handled this error yet. So how can we handle it? So the syntax for JavaScript exception is called try and catch. So this is how it looks. So building on top of this, we try the call logic first. The call logic that we want to have is this: get a user input and then console log the square root of this input number. So this is the call logic. We just try it, and then if there's anything wrong, we catch it. We catch this error, and then we handle it in this catch. And how we handle it? We may console.log some error message, like error.message. Okay, you may come up with another question, but I will answer you soon. So this is the call logic of using try and catch, which is exception in JavaScript. So above try, so these are just defining functions, importing libraries, and global variables. But the call logic is here. We try it without interrupting it. But if there's any error, we console log this error and stop the program. Okay, so if you have other things under this console log square root, for example, we make console log A and then B or whatever you have. So if they catch an error somewhere during the call logic, they will stop the program. So for example, the error may be caught here, like when they run the square root function, because we gave them a negative input. Anything below or after will be ignored because an error has been caught. All right. But the call logic is here in the try. So we assume everything works, but we catch any error during the call process if there anything goes wrong. So let's try to run that, see how it works. Okay, so this is our updated exception one. Enter number, let's give it a -1 again. So you can see this is what is given to us, error input negative, right? Any questions so far? We got a good question from the chat. Isn't error undefined, or is it part of the catch function? Okay, this is a very good question. So the question was, what is this one? What is this ERR? Okay, so this is an error object that we catch from here. So if there's any error object we catch, and this becomes the error object, and it can be anything. So I just say ERR here, but you can change it to ERROR, but it needs to be consistent. And what is in this error, or ERR or ERROR, is an error object. And it has two properties. The first one is the error.message, the message property. Another is the error.name. So let's have a look. It has two properties in this error object, error.message and error.name. And let's have a look what's in there. give it a -1. And the error message is error input negative, where we define here. So we define the error message here. Error input is negative. And the error's name is error, like we defined here. Okay. Yeah. So if you have more, so if you are throwing more errors, anyway, we'll just catch the first error. But according to the error message and the error name, you can know what is the error. So this is very similar to the error message that's thrown by JavaScript or Node.js. For example, we just make a very random error message. So we say x is number of one tab, which doesn't exist, right? So when we run this function, okay, so this is the error message that's thrown by Node.js. Node.js and JavaScript. And the name of this error is TS error, like TypeScript error, right? So this is the error's name, and the error message is unable to compile TypeScript exception 1 here and there. And what did you mean by number? Cannot find name number 1, right? So this is TypeScript defined or JavaScript defined error message, but here we are defining our own error by throwing new error. It works very similar to JavaScript error message. It's just we are defining our own error here, right? And error message is similar to the TypeScript's error message. So it has a name, it has an error message, and this is what we define here. So this is our error name, this is our error message, and they are stored in this error object, this ERR object. Okay. Yeah, I hope this answers your question. Any other questions so far? All good? Yeah, cool. So this is the convention of dealing with errors in JavaScript, and it's called exceptions. Oops, sorry. Let's go back to our slide. Yeah, so what we can do further is, so beyond this one, we can actually use a for loop, a while loop here. So we gotta have a global variable called success. So if not success, we keep asking the user for a valid user input until the user give a valid user input, right? So we can try this and see how it works. Exception 3, and for example, I give it -1, and so like error when inputting and error message, what is it? And then it asks you to enter a number again. I just keep giving it a negative number, and it will keep asking me for a valid user input until I give it a 9, and then the result, like the square root of 9, is shown here. It's just building on top what we have, but the core is the try and catch. So try and catch is the syntax of using exceptions in JavaScript. Yep. It's the same. Yeah, so the key points is here, exceptions carry data, the error object, carry the error's name and error's message. And when exceptions are thrown, normal code execution stops. So we also mentioned that. So the console log A, B, C, D won't happen. Like, let's go back to the simpler. So if we have some, like for example, console.log and A and console.log B, so this won't happen if an error is caught here. So the program is stopped where we catch an error. Okay. We got a question from online. What is parseInt? Yeah, another student answered already in the chat, like make a string to an integer. Yeah, that's true. So when we get an input using prompt function, the input we get is a string. But we want to use a number data type here. So we use the parseInt to make this input a number data type rather than a string. So this is why we had this pass it. Well, after we read this input data using prompt function. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Let me see if any other question. Yeah. Another question is, what if there are multiple errors? So what if we had, like, for example, here we had a square root pass in input, and then we had another one, like -1, like even more, even worse, like -1, and then we want to get a square root of -2. So what if there are 2 errors that needs to be cached? What will happen? What do you think? Yeah.
Fetch the first one first, and then you have to fix the first one, and we'll fetch the second one.
Yeah, so we mentioned, that's correct. So we mentioned that whenever an error is catched, the program will be terminated, right? So it won't go to the next potential error, right? So it will stop at the first error. So the second one won't be cached. The program just terminates there. Any other question? Yeah. Okay, so what if there's no error? Will anything in this catch be executed? No. So if everything works well in our core logic, in this try bracket, nothing in this catch will be executed. It will be ignored if there's no error catched. Okay, so the catch error here, so this bracket handles the errors. And here is the core logic. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so we can also using Jest test with exceptions. So we have learned to use Jest test to deal with when an expected output of a function is different from what we actually got from that function, right? So, but what if we want to test the error being thrown? How can we do that? Can we test the error that it's thrown? We want to make sure that we are throwing the correct error, right? So how can we do that? Right, so this is how we test with valid cases, like when the user input is 2, how can the user input is 4, like square root of 4 should be 2, right? The square root of 2 should be this, like close to this. But if what happens when a user input is negative? We can do similar things, and we use to throw or to throw error. To throw and to throw error, they are the same matches. They are exactly the same matches. They are just aliases of each other. And one thing that needs to pay attention to is that we want to. So what is required here is not a so in this one, for example, in the normal cases, we want to compare the square root of 4 and 2, right? But when we want to test the error message, we want to compare a function with the error message, because there's no valid output of that function. So we cannot say like square root -4 to throw something, right? It's not valid. It cannot get square root -4. So what to do here is this function, when the user input is -2, it should throw an error, and the error message is error input negative. Right, so this is something that we need to pay attention to. It's different from what we learned before. Like it should be this function when user input is -2 to throw an error message. Yeah, make sense? So this is how we can use Jest testing to test our exceptions. Yeah. So this lecture, what we covered is when we have a JS file, like a standalone JS file, and we throw some errors. But when we move on to iteration 3, we'll be testing across HTTP servers, and the testing will be different. But we'll cover that in a future week, so no worries at all. Yeah, question? Yeah, so the question was, what's the difference between dot to throw and dot to throw error? They are exactly the same. They are just to throw error is the alias of to throw. Yeah. Some programmers prefer to use to throw error because they think it makes more semantic sense, but they are the same. Okay, that's all for this lecture. Right. Let's have a break.